People love customization, and one of the easiest ways to let people customize their experience on your site is to allow them to change the color, the theme, the hue, the lightness, the darkness of your website. You can see here, we've got this task list project that we built out in the last video. In this video, what we're going to do is add on a theme switcher to it. So that lets them change from dark mode to light mode, no matter what their machine is set in. And then they can also change the theme hue. Everything in the entire site uses the same HSL scheme, and all I have to do is update that one color for the hue, and everything should update. So I can come in here and just drag this along, and now everything updates automatically. This is all done using the theme switcher that we're going to build out in this video. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. Now, this is technically a part 2, and I'm really going to speak to people who have already built out the past app, but you don't have to have done that. In fact, what I'm going to encourage you to do is if you didn't build it out, just come to the GitHub link in the repo and make sure you grab this starting branch, this main branch right here, and you can grab all the starting code. Just come over here and click Download Zip, and then unzip it and open it up in your favorite code editor. That's what I've done right over here, and you can see I don't have any node modules in here, so we actually need to install this. And in the last project, I set this up with pmpm, which is like npm except faster. So I'm going to just type pmpm I or pmpm install. That works as well, and it should install those node modules and get us up and ready to go. Then all I have to do is type pmpm run dev, and that should get your dev server up and running. I just click over here, and it should open this up to my to-do list. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to, again, talk as if you've already seen the last video and walked through it with me, but if you haven't, you should be able to follow along just fine. So if I come in here, all the main logic is inside this app.jsx file. And if I come to the very bottom, you can see that we're returning all this JSX and different forms and things depending on what state the app is in. What I want to do is come inside this div because you can only have one parent in each JSX thing you're returning. And I'm going to add something new here. We're going to call this theme switcher, just like that. And we're just going to drop it into the very bottom. And because I'm building it this way, you can really add this kind of functionality to any app, just like I'm doing here. You just drop it in at the bottom and it should work just the same. So let me come up top here and we're going to add that here. So we're going to input theme switcher. I grab both of those. Now if I save it, it should get angry because I haven't added that yet. So let's come in here. We're going to add a new file called themeswitcher.jsx. All right, let's go ahead and get just kind of a boilerplate up and running. And in my last video, I showed you that I've got a little snippet that will create that for me. So if I save that, come over here and refresh, there we go. We get theme switcher because that's what I'm returning inside this JSX. So I want to do a couple things here. First of all, we're going to talk through the current CSS and then add a module for this project. Now, just like in the last project, to not make this all about CSS, I'm just going to talk you through it. If you're not interested in that, you just want to paste the code from the description, no problem at all. In fact, let's go ahead and paste it first just so you can see that. Then I'll give you a timestamp you can jump to if you don't want to walk through the explanation with me. So if I come back over this way, you can come over here to the finished code. And inside the SRC folder, you're going to see a theme settings module. Just copy all the code out of there, come back over here, and you can paste it in. What we're going to do is create that right over here. So I'll say theme switcher.module.css. And right in here, we're going to paste all that in. All right, so there it is, 74 lines of code or so. And we're also going to be using some code from this index.css file. All right, if you're not interested, you can skip ahead for everyone else. Let me talk you through kind of how to set this up. All right, so last time we used this index.css file. The important thing for the actual theme switching is up top. So you can see here I've got a root declared, and this is essentially the same as the HTML. Everything is based off of a hue value, in this case 245, so that's the default. And what you can see is that I've got all these light mode presets and all these dark mode presets, and all of them use this hue variable except for the this accent 1, I think is the red color for the delete trash. I figured I probably shouldn't change the delete button to something else, but you can if you want to. So you can see here I've got a hue set up for all these. Now I'm not using these anywhere, they're just declared, and on top of that they're not wrapped in HSL, so they're not really even color values. Let me show you how I'm actually using them in real life then. So if I come down here, first of all, I'm declaring some global variables here of BG, text, accent, accent 1, and muted. And notice here, these all have these suffix on the end, either dark or light. So what I'm doing is whenever I'm preferring to color scheme dark, I'm pointing my global variables here to these variables up top. So it's variables pointed to variables. But what that means is all throughout my CSS, I can just reference these and then let the media queries take care of what they're pointing to. Same thing over here for the light mode. I've just used these kind of global variables, and then I pointed these to light. So whenever my color scheme prefers light, then that should work just fine. Now on top of that, I have changed one other thing, which is I've come in here and on this root, I've actually changed color scheme dark. So this would be an attribute on the HTML. So whenever I have an attribute called color scheme and it says dark, it's going to overwrite even my default preferences. Even if I'm in light mode, it's going to choose this because this is what I've actually chosen intentionally on top of everything else. Same thing here, color scheme light, it should choose that over everything else. Now, one other thing I mentioned, which was that my HSL values were not wrapped in an HSL function. But you can see here, I actually have wrapped both of these in HSL. Now, the reason I've done it this way is it allows me to add this transparency just basically as I'm going. So as I'm going, I can just add this transparency, and I don't have to come up with all these values ahead of time. So I can just do a / and a number, and that gives me a value of transparency. So in this case, 80%. All right, so that's the index.css file. If I jump over here to my theme switcher, I just got several classes declared. We've got a wrapper. This is going to be for, let's see, let me jump over here. It'll be for this whole section, everything that is contained in here. So all that section will be my wrapper. My buttons are those two buttons that are set next to each other. The picker is the actual range slider, and you can see I have it focused on none. Here, I'm hiding the default, and then I'm creating it as my own. And you can see I'm making it correspond to the colors that you can drag that slider to. When it comes to the actual thumb, which is the button on that range slider normally, again, I'm hiding the normal and I'm adding my own custom default instead. And then when I focus in on it, I'm changing out the box shadow so it's clear that I focused in on it. And then this is for the close button just to position it absolute up above everything else. All right, hopefully that helped walking you through it. For those of you who are just getting back, let's jump right into writing some JSX. Okay, so let's close down that module. We're not going to do anything more with that. Everything else will just be focusing on the functionality of writing this theme switcher. So we're going to need several things up top here. Since we just did the styles, let's go ahead and import those. So we'll say styles, and then up here I'll say import styles from, and this is a relative path theme switcher.module.module.css. Okay, so that should be now imported. And last time I showed you that you can just scope CSS using these modules, so that way I can keep it simple. In fact, if I were to open this back up, you could see that this theme switcher over here, I've got things like wrapper or buttons. Now, normally you wouldn't name something like that, but because it's inside a module, it's scoped to this, so I can keep it super simple. So that means if I come in here and change this to an aside, which is what we're going to change this to, I can now come and I can just say class name, and then in these curly brackets, just type styles dot, and then I can just reference any class. So in this case, I would reference wrapper, just like that. And now automatically it takes on these properties of that CSS. And if I were to come in here and inspect this and look at this, you can see it's scoped, it's added, React has added all this stuff to it. And that way I know for sure that this is scoped just to this particular component. All right, so let's close that down. And we're going to add several other things in here. In fact, I'm going to remind myself to add a style tag here in just a second for some custom styling. Now, if I come over here to the finished project, you can see I essentially have two different kinds of state. So here, this is one state where it's in, where I've got these two buttons next to each other, and this button just switches it from light mode to dark mode. So nothing really needs to change except for the button icon itself. If I click in here, though, it shows an entirely different view. So those are kind of my two states that we're going to think about. And I'm going to use something we're going to call is color picking. So like, are you color picking right now? We're going to use that piece of state to decide which of these two options we're going to show. So let me come back over here, and we need to pull in use state. So let's go ahead and just destructure two values from it and let VS Code pull it in for us automatically. So we'll say is color picking, and then we'll say set is color picking. We're going to pull these both from use state. If I start to type, you can see it shows up right here. If I hit tab, it should import it up top, and it does. And to start with, we'll just set this value to false. All right, and then let me move this use state up top and save it. Okay, so is color picking. This is what I want to use to decide which thing I show down below. So that means we're going to have two different options, and I can do that inside of curly brackets. So I'll come in here, and we can do is say is color picking. And what I can do is just then run a ternary. So I can say, if this is true, do this. If this is true, do this. All right. So in other words, if it's true, do this. If it's false, do this. So that's what we're going to do. So if color picking is true, I want to add both a button and a range slider. Because those are two items and I need one parent when I'm returning JSX, let's go ahead and use a fragment just like this. We're going to add two things then. We're going to add a button like that. And then we'll also add an input, and this will have a type of range. All right, so that's set. Let's now come down here, and we obviously need to do more with that, but at least it's ready for us. We're going to have a div here. This will have a class of buttons, I think. Or you know what? This was part of our module. So I need to come in here and say styles.btns. All right, and this should set these two things next to each other. We'll have two buttons in here. And if I just copy this down 2 times, now those should show. If I say like 1 and 2, you should see them down that way. That means if I change this out and say, hey, show this if it's not color picking, it should switch it. And there's my range slider. And let's add something here. We'll add A. All right, so the button's up above. Okay, perfect. Let me change this back. So now let's work on these 2 buttons since we've got them visible. I'm going to want some icons inside of here for both of these. And in fact, on this one right here, this is the one I'm going to have either a moon or a sun, depending on what we do. Now we're going to grab all these from hero icons. And last time I showed you how to get this module up and running, but if I come in here, you can see, or this library up and running, you can see I can install right here. I just used pnpm install hero icons react, and then now it's part of this project. So if you install it with me, you're set to go. Let's go ahead and then import, and let's just grab all the icons we need. And so let's say import, and inside here, we're going to just grab several of these all at the same time. So I need an X mark icon, and I grab the outline version of that. Then I also need like a sun icon, I think, and a moon icon. I think that's what that's called. And finally, I need a swatch icon. These are just the names that come from hero icons, and you can go look them up if you want to over here. All right, so let me pull this in. Now what I want to do is add these right inside here. So this one, I'm going to use my moon icon to start with. We'll just drop it right in there. And in this one, I know this one always needs to be my swatch icon. So I'll say swatch icon, just like that. Okay, so if I save this, this should pull these up down here. You know what? It's not. And I think that's actually because I need to add some classes on both of these. So let me come in here. We're going to add a class name, and both of these are just going to be the class name of button. And there they go. They pop in below. Now this button class comes from my global CSS file that we added in the last project. All right, but there they are. They show up next to each other. If I were to come in here and switch this out for the sun icon, now that one should show. Perfect. Okay, so let's just keep it like that for now. Let's add a couple other things though here. Because this is just an icon, it doesn't have any kind of label to it. I need to make sure I add a label, so I'll say aria label here. And in this case, I want to do something a little bit different, and it's going to require a piece of state that'll actually let me switch out the icon as well. So first of all, I'm going to do a template string here. We're going to say change theme to, and what do I want to change it to? Well, if it's dark, I want to change it to light, and vice versa. So we're going to add a little template string to come back to here, and then at the end say mode. So we'll use that template string to decide whether or not we should do light mode or dark mode. So the piece of state we're going to write is going to be just the piece of state of theme. And I'll say if that is light, then go ahead and add dark here. And if it's dark, then go ahead and add light, just like that. Now, right now I don't have that piece of state, so it doesn't know what to do. So let's come up here and let's change this out to theme and set theme. And right now we're going to start this at, I guess we'll start it at light. All right, there we go. So I click here. Oh, we haven't set anything up yet, but you can now see if I were to come in here and inspect this, right inside here, change color theme to dark mode. All right, perfect. That's what I want. Now I can also use that same piece of state to decide which of these icons to show. So once again, let's do curly brackets here, and I'll say theme equals dark. So if it does equal dark, then go ahead and show, oops, close that out. Then go ahead and show the sun icon. Otherwise, show the moon icon. So same kind of thing, that should work just the same. Now back up here in these attributes for the button, let's add 2 other things. I'm going to add a role of switch just to show that it switches between the 2 values. And then secondly, let's add an on-click method. So when I click this, what do I want to do? I'm going to pass it to a function called handle theme button. All right, so let's write that up top here. Let's see, outside the return right here. So I'll say const handle theme button. And you could also obviously just write this inline. It's not going to be anything too fancy, because all we're going to do is set the theme here. If the theme is already light, then we'll change it to dark. Otherwise, I'm just going to set it to light. All right, so that means if I come over here, I should be able to click and it should just switch back and forth, which it does. Cool. So there's that button mostly done. Let's now come down below. We've got one more button in the initial state, and that's this swatch icon. Just like before, let's space this out to give it a little bit more space. And I'm going to add an aria label as well. And this will just say something like enable color picking mode. And in this case, I also want an on-click event. And maybe this time let's just write it inline. How about that? All right, so we'll do it inline whenever it's clicked. I want to set is color picking to false, or to true, right? So that means I should be able to come in here. When I click this, this changes. When I click this, it should switch to the other view, and it does. Cool. Now I don't have any way to get out of it, so let's refresh. Now let's work on the other view. So that's actually all we're going to do for this section down here, because I just need to either toggle this. Eventually, we'll actually write functionality to handle that. But as far as styling, we're good to go. Okay, so back up here, let's go ahead and add a couple things inside this button here. Let's add a class name. And in this case, I actually want to apply two different classes. One of them will be from my module, and one of them will be from the global style sheet. So I can do that here if I come in here with a template string. So we'll say button, and then inside here we'll say styles.close. That was the module class I added. All right, next, aria label. Again, it has no label, so I need to provide one here. Close color picking mode, like that. And then on click, let's pass a function, and maybe let's write this inline as well. You know what, I'm going to change the other one up top to inline. It doesn't make sense to have two of these one way and the other way. So we'll say is color picking false. So that should work. Then I also need an icon in here, X mark icon. I think I pulled that in up top, and that should drop that in right there. So let's go ahead and, since we've already got the other ones written this way, let me get rid of this just to keep the functions up top a little clearer, and we'll just add it in just like this, okay? So whenever they click this, it sets the theme to the opposite of whatever it currently is. All right, so now I should be able to come in here and switch this to light and dark, and then open the color panel and close the color panel. All right, so that's some real basic functionality. Let's now work on the input slider itself. So I'll come in here, and this range is right, but let's add a couple other things to it as well. So I'm going to add a class name first of all, and this is going to come from my module. So we'll say styles.picker. And then let's add an aria label again, just to make sure that this is identifiable. This will say change color theme slider. And then with the type of range, we can actually give it a min value and a max value. And since HSL goes from 0 to 360, I can just type min and max. Now, technically, if you go over 360, it just loops back around, but why not limit it to that range? And that way I know exactly the numbers I'm getting are going to be between 0 and 360. All right, lastly, I want to double bind the value of this range slider. So let's go ahead and say value. We're going to point this to a piece of state called theme hue, or actually maybe let's just call it hue. And then we'll say on input. And again, we're going to write this inline here. We'll just say set hue to e.target.value. So whenever I'm dragging the slider, it should actually be passing back a value between 0 and 360. And that's when I want to set my hue state to. So if I come up top here, let's go ahead and set these two. So I'll say hue, like that. And right now, let's set this to like, I don't know, 240, something like that. So if I save here and I come over here, I should be able to drag this range slider, and it should update automatically. Now it's not letting me drag it, and I don't really know why. So let me open this up. We got a problem. Okay. I never passed in the event. Okay, so let's try that again. Come in here and click, drag it. There we go. Okay, so it should be updating. And in fact, let's just double check it. Look inside here, theme switcher right here. Let's look at the state 278, 267. Okay, perfect. And again, this one should be switching to light and dark. And this is the state showing whether or not I'm color picking. All right, so that's all working properly. Now all you have to do is actually hook this up to do something. Now, we're going to do that with a couple functions up top. Now, the easiest way to handle a changing piece of state when it comes to the UI in React is using the useEffect hook. So useEffect, and I'm going to just hit tab to import that up top, and then actually, let's just copy this and add it as another destructured thing from React. Okay, so that pulls that in. Now, where is that? Oh, right here. Okay, what you need to do is add two things inside of here. First is going to be a function. This is what we're going to run. And then the second thing will be whatever state is going to update this, or any exterior things that need to be passed in to be used inside of this function. So we're going to write two different useEffect hooks, so that way they don't have to be bound together. They can run independently of each other. So first of all, we're going to have our theme. That's the light and dark mode theme. And all I want to do is come in here and change one thing. So we'll have a little function that runs. That'll just say document.document element. So this is the same as essentially the HTML. And I'm going to set an attribute on that. The attribute I want to change is that color scheme to whatever my theme is. Since again, I passed in the theme from the outside here, I need to pass it in as a dependency of this useEffect hook. So if I come in here and save, it should work. If I click here, it should switch over to dark mode. Now, why is it working like this? Well, in our CSS file, if I come back over here and open our index.css file, I set their preferred color scheme here to light and dark, but then anytime on the root or on the HTML or on the document element, same thing, anytime I have a attribute color scheme that says dark, override whatever their preferences are with this. So that's all I'm doing, and if I were to come over here and inspect this, you can see here now I've got this color scheme dark. I could come manually change this to light, and it should change over to light mode. So I'm just accomplishing that essentially with CSS, but if I change one thing, adding this attribute to the HTML, everything should update for me automatically. So that's all we have to do with that, and it's very similar when it comes to the hue. So I'll come in here and pass in hue as a dependency here, and hue right here. In this case, though, I'm setting a variable, a custom CSS variable of hue, and that's what I named it in my index.css file. I do need to change this around a bit because I'm not setting an attribute. Instead, I'm saying style.set, and in this case, it's property. That means I should be able to come in here now, and whenever I change that hue value right here, this piece of state, this useEffect hook should run. And it does, and everything updates for me. Come over here, close it to dark mode. Cool. So that's almost done, except we've got a couple things to think about. Number one, when I open this up, I actually want to change the background here. So I want some optional styling. And then number two, we need to make this to where when you save it, it should update automatically. So if I come back down here, let's see on this aside, I'd set aside this style tag that I need to add. So I've shown you how to do global style sheets. I showed you how to do modules. Now I want to show you how to write inline styles if you need to. Now in React, it's just going to be an object. So I'm going to do some templating and I'm going to add an object inside here. And then you just write these like you would in any JavaScript file. So I'm going to change the background color. So background color like that. And I'm going to set it to, again, this is an object, depending on whether I'm color picking. So I'll say is color picking. And in this case, if I am color picking, then what I want to do is pass in the HSL, and I want to pass in a variable that I wrote in my index.css file. And because this is going to load after that, I can just reference anything I've already referenced, any of those custom variables in my CSS file. In this case, I want it to be at 60% opacity, and I want it to be my muted variation. Maybe let's actually space this out just a touch to make it a little easier to read. And then I'll come in here as the alternative, and I'll just set it to transparent. All right, so what that means is essentially if I am not color picking, I don't want there to be any kind of background here. If I am color picking, I now want this to have kind of a background just to show it's its own little section down here, and then I can close it down. All right, so that's one of the things we had to take care of. The other thing was making it to where when you refresh, if I refresh, it should stay with whatever my previous choices were. So what I'm going to do is just switch out one thing, and that is this use state here and here for my custom hook that we created last time. Let's walk through that real briefly, and I'll put a timestamp if you want to jump past this if you already know how to do this from last time. We have this useLocalStorage hook that we created. It pulls in useEffect and useState, and you know what? Let's just add these together. There's no reason to have two different lines there. You can see that what it does is it sets a piece of state up top to value and set value. And it's pulling some of the stuff in that we're going to pass to it, key and initial value to it. And this will be two things that we can pass into our custom hook. But it declares a piece of state. This piece of state is a function. And what it does is it checks the thing we passed in right here and says, hey, is there a local value that corresponds to the key in my local storage? If there is, then that's what it returns right here. If there's not, then it just passes in whatever initial value we set. So then what it's going to do is use a useEffect hook that anytime we change either the key or the value, it should go ahead and save our new preference right here to our local storage. Then at the end of all this, it returns our value and our set value. So this is the piece of state, the getter, and this is the setter. Set value or set theme or set whatever. And you can name it differently when you destructure it. If I go over here to my app, we use this right here to set our local storage. So we said, hey, here's the key and here's the initial state if there's nothing in that spot in my local storage. So we're going to do something very similar over here. So let's first of all come in here. I guess let's go right here and we'll just say custom hooks. And I'll say import useLocalStorage. And if I hit tab, that should automatically complete that. Then I'm just going to change this out and change this out right here. This is just a local piece of state to this component. It doesn't need to pull from the local storage. All right, so then what we need to do is give it two values once again. We'll say react to do dot color, and we'll set this to an initial value of like 240, something like that. And then I'll say react to do dot theme, and we'll set this to Now, it kind of depends if it's light mode or dark mode. So why don't we do this just the first time that they come to this site, we'll use whatever their default is and set that as the default here. So let's write one more little thing up here. We'll say const default dark, and this is just plain old vanilla JavaScript. We're going to look at the window and look at the media matching property, or match media. And all you have to do is give it a query string and then whether or not it matches. So in this case, the query string we're going to give it is if it prefers color scheme dark, like that, and then dot matches. So this will return either a true or a false statement. It's truthy or falsy. And all I'm going to do is take this default dark and I'm going to pass it in right here. So I'll say default dark. So if it's true, then go ahead and set this to dark by default. Otherwise, set it to light by default. So hopefully that makes sense. What I'm doing is I'm basically saying, hey, give me their default color the first time they come, if they prefer light or dark mode, and we'll use that to set their theme color to start with, and then they can update it if they want to down here. Now, I went ahead and saved this. I must be in dark mode, and if I open this up down here and come over here to the application, right over here, you can see now I've got values 191 and dark. So I must have set this earlier. But if I come in here now and I start to move this around and I refresh, it should update for me. There we go, 256. And again, I should be able to switch to light mode and come over here and it's now set to light mode. All right, so that is a completed project. When I come back and refresh, it all stays for me and I can just switch between light and dark mode. It remembers that. I can drag this along. I think somewhere right around there is my favorite on dark mode. To do, finish this video, done. All right, all this is remembered for me, which is pretty cool. Now here's the cool thing about this theme picker project. Because we've done all of this as just kind of a separate component and all we've done is drop it in at the very bottom here, theme switcher, you can add this to any project. You just have to make sure your CSS file uses hues the same way I have. So it has everything as HSL values, and anything you'd want to update just needs to have that hue variable as a CSS variable in your index.css file, or whatever your global style sheet is. If you have any problems with this, go ahead and check out the finished code. If you enjoyed this, leave a like. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Happy coding.